One of the most scarce positions in the Baseball Hall of Fame is relief pitchers. As of the date of this video's upload, there are only 8 relievers ever inducted into Cooperstown. Naturally, that makes sense, as modern bullpens weren't mainstream until the 1970s, and the save statistic wasn't adopted into Major League Baseball until 1969. Over 50 years later, you can count on both hands the number of relief pitchers enshrined in baseball's highest honor. With that being said, there are multiple relievers on this year's Hall of Fame ballot, and the most intriguing one to me has to be Francisco Rodriguez. Nicknamed K-Rod for his high strikeout rate, Rodriguez had one of the most dominant careers of any pitcher during the 2000s and 2010s. But was he good enough to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Francisco Rodriguez was a relief pitcher who played in Major League Baseball for 16 seasons from 2002 to 2017. He pitched for 5 teams, but spent the most time with the Los Angeles Angels. In his career, K-Rod pitched in nearly 950 games, all out of relief, and threw nearly 1,000 innings. He saved 437 games, while recording an ERA of 2.86, adjusted ERA of 148, a WHIP of 1.155, struck out 10.5 batters per 9 innings, and earned 24.2 WAR. He's a 6-time All-Star, received Cy Young votes 3 times, and received MVP votes once. You probably remember Rodriguez best for breaking the record for most saves in a single season. His 62 saves in 2008 are not only still the record, but it's still the only occurrence of a pitcher reaching the 60-save plateau. Since 2008, only once has someone gotten within 10 saves of the record. You can probably tell how incredible K-Rod was during his time in baseball. You don't set the all-time saves record or throw nearly 1,000 innings out of relief unless you are one of the best out there. However, while he was an amazing pitcher, just how good was Francisco Rodriguez when compared to others during his career, as well as pitchers all time? Quick side note, when comparing players, I'll be looking at pitchers who came out of relief in at least 70% of the games they appeared in. Why 70%? Naturally, I wanted to see pitchers who were used as a reliever more often than as a starter, although I didn't want the difference to be too close. Sometimes, pitchers might start out as a starting pitcher and then transition to a relief pitcher, or were always a relief pitcher but sometimes made occasional starts. If a pitcher started and relieved a similar number of games, it could skew some stats. For example, take Francisco Rodriguez's former teammate, Calvin Escobar. A pitcher who played from 1997 to 2009, Escobar started 202 games during his career and came out of relief in 209 games. While he technically was used as a reliever more often than a starter, I don't think it would be fair to compare him to other pitchers who were used exclusively as a relief pitcher. 70% of games out of relief seems like a sweet spot in my opinion. It filters out some pitchers that might skew some results, but still offers an ample array of others who were predominantly a reliever in their career. Glad to get that out of the way, so moving on. Among relief pitchers from 2002 to 2017, Francisco Rodriguez ranks first for most games pitched and is tied for most saves. He's also third in WAR and 5th in innings pitched. Out of the 107 relievers with at least 500 innings pitched during this span, K-Rod is inside the top 10 in strikeouts per 9 innings, ERA, and adjusted ERA, and in the top 15 in WHIP. Having the most saves during one's career speaks for itself, especially when you consider he's tied with the greatest closer of all time in Mariano Rivera. Of course, that shouldn't be too surprising since we looked at his entire career. How good was Rodriguez during his prime? In a 10-season stretch from 2004 to 2013, K-Rod ranks first for most games pitched in, 4th for both saves and WAR, and 5th for innings pitched. Among 118 relievers with at least 350 innings pitched here, Rodriguez ranks inside the top 5 in strikeouts per 9 innings, top 10 in ERA and adjusted ERA, and top 25 in WHIP. Another set of impressive rankings, especially the games played. If you pitch in more games than any other pitcher for that long of a period, you're doing something right. While K-Rod has that notable achievement, as well as other great rankings, How well does he compare to other relief pitchers through all of MLB history? Throughout the history of Major League Baseball, Francisco Rodriguez ranks inside the top 6 in saves, top 20 in games pitched and WAR, and top 65 in innings pitched. I'm sure it's obvious, but to re-emphasize, all of those stats are just among relief pitchers with a minimum 70% of games out of relief. Speaking of which, of the 257 relievers with at least 750 career innings pitched, K-Rod is inside the top 10 in adjusted ERA and strikeouts per 9 innings, and top 20 in ERA and WHIP. That was a lot said. So to sum up everything so far, during his time in the league, Francisco Rodriguez was one of the most dependable relief pitchers. He was undoubtedly a top 10 reliever, and what he might lack in some placements, he makes up for with his enormous number of saves. When he was at his best, there were very few that were as good as him. A top 5 ranking in saves and WAR, and top 7 placement in ERA and adjusted ERA, one could argue he was a top 5 relief pitcher in Major League Baseball during that 10-year span. When compared to relievers throughout history, K-Rod is lacking in some areas, mainly innings pitched, where he ranks outside the top 60. Despite that lowish amount, he's still in the top 20 for WAR and top 10 in saves and adjusted ERA. If we look at relievers with as many or more innings pitched than Rodriguez, he's now second in adjusted ERA. Add on the fact that he's one of 8 pitchers with at least 400 saves, I don't think it would be far-fetched to say that Rodriguez was a top 15 reliever of all time, maybe even top 10. Is that enough though? Should Rodriguez be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame? It's pretty close, much closer than you might think. Case in point, among every relief pitcher in baseball history, there are only 3 to throw at least 900 innings, achieve an adjusted ERA of at least 145, and save at least 400 games. Those 3 are Mariano Rivera, Billy Wagner, and Francisco Rodriguez. So what, you might be saying? Saves aren't always the best indicator for success, and his adjusted ERA is lower than other relievers not in the Hall. True, Billy Wagner has an adjusted ERA of 187, and Joe Nathan 151. However, look at it like this. In the wildcard era of Major League Baseball, which is 1995 to present day, K-Rod is one of 18 relief pitchers to throw at least 975 innings. Of those 18, he's one of 3 with at least 200 saves. The others are Mariano Rivera and Jason Isringhausen. Not to mention, in the same time frame, he also has the 5th highest WAR of any reliever. The 4 in front of him are Rivera, Wagner, Nathan, and Trevor Hoffman. Based on that, in the past 30 years, Francisco Rodriguez was statistically one of the most used relief pitchers, one of the best at saving games, and simply just one of the best out there. If you were to list the greatest relief pitchers of the past 3 decades, K-Rod is, at absolute worst, in the top 5. Something people often comment on my videos is how do players perform in the postseason? At baseball's highest stage, do star players rise to the occasion? Francisco Rodriguez threw 36 2/3 innings in the postseason and earned an ERA of 2.95. Seeing how that's only slightly above his career mark of 2.86, it shows he was just as good there, despite what the Red Sox might say. Additionally, I made a video covering this, but K-Rod also had one of the greatest and most clutch performances by a relief pitcher in baseball history. Not to get into too much detail, but during the 2002 playoffs, he achieved an ERA of 1.93 across over 18 innings, while also winning 5 games. If you're someone that takes postseason success into mind for Hall of Fame consideration, that should only help convince you of K-Rod's chances. Despite all of that, I'm going to say no. Francisco Rodriguez should not be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think the biggest issue is that K-Rod's peak and overall analytics are overshadowed by others. Don't get me wrong, they are incredible, but there were pitchers that were just as good or even better. Take Billy Wagner. He has about 70 fewer innings pitched, but a much better adjusted ERA, with a mark of 187. Not to mention, only 15 fewer saves than Rodriguez. Joe Nathan pitched about 50 fewer innings, but still has a higher WAR and even a slightly higher adjusted ERA. There's even active pitchers that arguably have had a better career than Rodriguez did. Kenley Jansen has about 100 fewer innings, but a higher adjusted ERA and more saves. Craig Kimbrell has more saves and a better adjusted ERA, and while Aroldis Chapman has much fewer counting stats, I would argue Chapman's peak was much better than K-Rod's. In reality, the big thing that holds up Rodriguez's Hall of Fame case comes down to his saves, both his career number and his record-breaking season. Saves are situational though, so while he does have a ton of them, it doesn't justify a Hall of Fame induction. Think about it like this. Rodriguez was one of the great relief pitchers during his career and during his prime, but he wasn't the best and he wasn't that close. Unlike someone like Mark Burley, what Rodriguez accomplished during his career has been repeated several times over in recent years, and we may very well see others in the future overtake him as well. Francisco Rodriguez is the single-season save king, having more in 1 year than any other pitcher in baseball history. His 437 career saves are also more than just a handful of others. He was a dominant force in the bullpen who had a monumental career, but in my opinion, not notable enough for a Hall of Fame induction.